Hi guys, and welcome to the start of the next video. This one is going to be a CVH, Ford CVH cylinder head recondition. I used to race escorts actually, so when I was 17 I raced at a track called Needwood, and I raced the CVH engine, and I've built a fair few CVHs, so it's really nice seeing one of these things again. This one is off an XR2. You can always tell what CC it is. They're stamped here, and this is a BRA casting number. I can't actually remember what all the differences were with this BRA number. I used to know. This is the CVH is compound valve hemispherical because it's like a hemi design. This one is a carburetted one. The reason I know that is my customer's already told me it's off an XR2, and also because this here is the push rod, which is driven off the camshaft, which runs in the middle. That's the push rod for moving the fuel pump plunger in and out. So that there, I'll take that out as well. It then, my customer's dropped it off like this, but it has hydraulic followers in here. The RS 1600i had a mechanical follower, and then it has a rocker arm, but we haven't got those bits. What he has left on though is these little spacers here, so we need to make sure we keep them safe. What we've got to do with this is just recondition it, ready to go back onto the XR2. So if I spin this over, I can show you in here as well. Now these valves, they're in on an angle, and also it's a compound valve angle as well, so they're quite tricky. These was never really great for power. One of the biggest problems, which I'll show you once I've stripped it, is the valves are really long and quite heavy, but straight away I can see that this might have had a cooling problem, because this is a waterway here and it's all blocked up, so we need to get all that out as well. So the first job for me is to remove the cam, get the studs out of it, remove the sensor, all the little bits and bobs, get them in the basket ready to go into the acid bath, and then start to recondition it. So the first thing I'm going to do before I strip it is to just try and ease out some of this old corrosion, just to make the cleaner's job easier. Well, the acid won't even get rid of that, to be fair, but it gets stuck in quite well. Need a little hammer. Let me get a little hammer. So I'm just gonna it's corroded. It needs a bit of welding on this cylinder head. Right, so next thing I'm going to do is just completely strip it down. So have you just nicked a round tray, Sam? Right, so I've got a metal tray to put all my bits in. Two of these spacers have fell off when I've turned it upside down, so we're going to get them in there. And then to get the cam out, the cam pulley has to come off, and then there's two. You all right? So. Once the cam pulley's off, there's two 8mm there, so we can just undo them, and then it has a thrust washer in here. So what I'll do is just screw the bolts back into that loosely. And then there's a water temperature switch in here. So we'll take that out. I'm not going to put that in the acid because that would destroy the plastic in there. So I'll leave that out. There's then a lifting eye, so we'll get that off. That can go in the acid to be cleaned up. Then I'm going to de-stud it because I want to clean up the manifold faces. So I use one of these chuck style stud remover, which is good because it shocks the stud out. Normally if you're trying to undo the stud carefully, where you're putting like an even pressure on it, it can snap the stud. With an impact driver, it shocks the stud. Come on, mate. Go the other side. Just move this over. Now I flip that over, I can just remove the rest of these studs. And that's the push rod for the fuel pump. It's covered in dirty old carbonised oil. So the acid will take care of that. That's the last one. So the next thing that I now need to do is all the studs are out of this. I'm going to leave these rocker studs in because they won't affect me cleaning the gasket faces up. The camshaft has to come out now. There's an oil seal in here which I'll take out also. Now where the cams normally run, it normally blocks all up with oil, so it makes them a little bit tricky to take out, but they do just slide out. Like that. Now this cam is it's quite badly worn, so this isn't really going to be any good for my customer to reuse this. Luckily it's something that he can fit himself, so I won't be putting that back in unless he wants to supply me a cam kit. But yeah, that's not great, that. So there's not even no point putting that in the acid. The next thing I need is a tiny little bit of wire, because I want to clean up all these spacers. And what I don't want to do is when it goes in the acid, I don't want to kind of risk dropping any of them. So what I do is these holes that are in this container here, I just wrap them around there, and then they won't fall out, and it keeps them nice and safe. So I need to get the airline now to compress the valve spring. And basically, where this is a triple cotter, it's just bit the top of the valve, so you just have to give it a little tap to break the seal. The collets, they won't go in the acid, we just put them in the same little pot as what we've got the coolant temp sensor in, but they'll get washed out in the hot wash and the geyser. So that's the 4 exhaust springs released. Now there is a valve stem seal upgrade for these. This has got the standard style on, and what happens with these is oh, it might not actually be standard, is it? Might have had the modified ones on. This is unusual to get fair plies. So basically what these normally have is a spring seat. So it just sits along there, and then just a normal style stem seal on the top. and what they did was a modified stem seal. And so basically what used to happen is the heat and the oil used to make the stem seal swell and go hard, and then it would jump off the guide, and that would be one of the problems why CVHs used to smoke. So what they did was used to fit these, and I believe these was off my mind serves me right, I think they was an 1800 diesel stem seal. I mean, even that's hard, and that is a modified stem seal. So the actual seat is now part of the seal. And this is what we put onto Vauxhall VXR engines as well nowadays. Like, not this size actually, a different one, but the same design. But basically, the valve spring holds the seal down. I've already taken 3 of these inlet ones out, just the one more inlet. You got some? It's brand new, isn't it? I put them somewhere. They're in the shop. And there's another monster long valve. And if I show you that in comparison to, say, a red top Vauxhall, so that's an inlet valve off a 1600 CVH 8 valve, and that's an inlet valve off a 2 litre 16 valve Vauxhall. And as you can see, they are completely different in size. So we'll get the valves out, they can go in the shot blaster, get rid of the valve stem oil seals, and then we'll go and drop the cylinder head and the relating parts into the acid bath for a few hours to remove all of this carbonised oil, which I'll show you. It looks quite a mess. The next thing on reconditioning the CVH is the valves. So the first thing on reconditioning the valves is to shot blast all the oil and carbon off them and clean them up. So we do that in the shot blaster. We turn the power down. It's got quite a smooth media in there as well. And well, I say the power, it's actually the air going into it. So instead of running it at 55 psi, I turn it down to 30. And then that's a nice steady flow of media on the back of the valve so it don't damage the stem or anything. So we'll get that done and I'll show you what they look like. Right, so I've just taken the CVH out of the acid. It's been in there for a couple of days, and I'll show you what it's like and exactly what we've got to do now. I mean, it's in a lot better condition than what it was. All the carbon is out of the exhaust ports. It's cleaned the combustion chambers up nice. It has taken all the corrosion out of down here, so the waterways are actually waterways again and not blocked. There's somewhere I still need to do a little bit of work by hand, but most of it is gone, which is good news. But like I say, I can scrape a lot of this out now. The majority's out of it. I've got to put a little bit of welding here, and also there was one other place, I can't see it now. Oh, maybe just one point. I thought there was 2. It might have been corrosion making it look bad. Oh no, there. It's gone past the gasket. The gasket seal is here, and it's right up to the gasket seal. So I'm going to grind this out of here. I'll grind all this back here and then build it up with weld and then remachine it. Before I do any of that, what I am going to do is just quickly pressure test it. I've noticed since it's come out of that acid, there's a little heat crack here, which isn't uncommon on these. They ideally want all these edges rounding off to stop that happening. The valves are in the shot blaster, so I've just got to finish them, but compared to what it looked like, it's night and day different. I've still got to clean the gasket faces up. It will go in the hot tank over here for a few hours once all the machining's done on it, so it will look better again. But it's definitely getting there. It's in a lot better condition than what it was when it got here. I've now welded the CVH head up. This is the first weld on it. So the next job for me to do is just face that down, just see if I've got any blowholes in it that I've got to take care of afterwards. In fact, I've just spotted that as well, so I'll if there is any blowholes, I'll grind that out and put a bit of weld on there as well to sort that out. So I've cleaned up the combustion chamber on the CVH. I'm going to clean up the rest of it in here just to blend it all in. But what I'm doing now is reshaping the waterways. These are the two that I've welded up, and as you can see, like the standard ones, they've got quite a nice shape to them, where this one you could see all the weld in there. This one I've done it a little bit actually, so that one's not so bad now. But all I'm going to use for this is this little snap-on battery die grinder, and then I'm just going to follow the original shape. What I'm going to do now is just get the new cylinder head gasket and just make sure that this looks nice and neat, give it a deburr, polish this, so cut the seats, and then we can get this back together. So these are the CVH valves now been shot blasted. So the next job for me to do is to polish the stem along here. I'll do that in the lathe. I'll do it with a very fine emery, and if you move your fingers up and down the stem quite quick, you can feel any wear, but we will measure this as well. But that's the next process for these. So the next thing on the CVH is for me to reface the valves. I've shot blasted all the carbon off, and I've polished the stem of the valve, and I've had a measure up as well. So I'm going to stick this in the Comac. The machine is already set to 45 degrees. This is a 45 degree seat, so the valve's got to be set at 45, which is there. And then I'm going to set it up. These are quite long valves on a CVH, so I'm going to have to adjust the stops on the machine and just pull the valve back into the machine a bit more, and then reset it, and then just make sure everything is missing but very close, and then switch the machine on, wait for the coolant to come out, and just set it up so the coolant is on the valve so it doesn't burn the seat, and then very gently just coming onto the seat cutter, keeping the valve moving so it keeps the wear evenly on the stone and on the valve. And then I'm looking at the valve seat, and then as soon as it's cleaned up all the distortion and any pitting on there, I can just back it off one full turn and release the pressure on the drive unit of the valve. To the inlets. I've got to come into the wheel very slow to make sure that, because the inlet valve is bigger, that it's not just hitting the wheel straight away. And then I'll put this on a different angle so you can actually see the grinding on the valve. Well, this is virtually my view. And then if you can see that the actual shiny part here is where it's starting to grind, and the rest of it is wear. Let's do another one and have a look. And you can actually hear that that's slightly bent, and you can see it where it's missing on one part of the valve. Two more left. This one actually looks quite bad, so we'll see what this grind's like. Yeah, I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but there's quite a groove in there where it's been on its seat. It's just starting to clean it up now. Go, that's 8 CVH valves all reconditioned. So I'm going to take one of each now upstairs to the seat cutter and then recut the valve seats. Okay, so I'm now on with cutting the seats on the CVH. The good thing about this setup is you can move and set the plate up so it's running at 90 degrees with the valve guide. The next thing to do is to pick a cutter which is going to mimic the original seat, because it's a Hemi style head and they're kind of in the combustion chamber. If I was to use much of a thinner seat, so going down to like a 1.5, the top degree, because it's 3 angle, would put like a nasty groove in the cylinder head. And this is only a standard car, so if it was a race engine I would be changing the combustion chamber or blending the combustion chamber and blending the seat into the chamber so I could deal with that. But on a standard cylinder head, what I don't want to do is leave myself a sharp edge. So instead of running quite a thin seat, I'm gonna put a 45 on it, which is roughly the same as the standard seat. In fact, I'm going to go a little bit smaller because it looks like it's about 3 mil. So I'm going to run a 2 mil. So I've got loads of these cutters and they're all marked with the size of the cutting edge. Well, so basically on there, this is a 1.5 by 45. So what that means is the 45 degree seat is 1.5 mil wide. And then I've got 1 mil, 0.8, and somewhere here there is a 2 mil. Which is that one there. Let me just make sure. Another 1.5. 1.5 is kind of the common the 1.5. I've got quite a lot of different angles and radiuses and things like that for when I'm doing porting job, when I want to open the throat or put a radius into the combustion chamber. But that's the seat, that's the cutter I'm going to use for this inlet seat. And then what I'm going to do now is I need to plot off the valve where I'm going to put the seat. So I'm going to go right to the top edge on that, open this measuring tool up, so it's plotting right off the top of the valve, right at the top of the seat of the valve. So I don't know if that's showing that, but and then we then use this onto the head of the seat cutter and we put it right to the top of the cutter on the 45. So it's basically putting the seat cut on the same place as the seat of the valve. Just go in a little bit. That's about it. And then I just reset the machine so it basically puts the head of the machine back into the centre. It's going to need a bigger pilot in it actually. I thought I was using the right pilot on my last job, but that's a tad small. These are just all different size pilots. The top part which fits into the machine is just a generic size. It's 9.52, and then this size here is different sizes for different size guides. And then if you've got like a tight guide or a worn guide, I've got the tighter tolerance or higher tolerance. So they're normally marked on there, but I can't actually see that. I could just about see it. It's 8 point, I can't read it, 8 point something. So we just screw that in, lock it in so it can't move into the head of the machine with the little grub screw. And then what I want to do is bring the cutter down so it's just off the seat. So we'll switch the magnet on first and then centralise it in its guide, so that will move across the 4 axes on the servos and then find the centre of the guide, and then the computer will tell me that it's found the centre and it's safe to lock the head of the machine. So we do that by moving that lever over and then just put the Veradrive unit onto the top. I'll build some speed up and then very carefully just come in and cut the new seat. And that's it, it's got a fresh new seat all the way round, and then it's just machined into the radius as well. And then what I can do to double check it, to make sure the seat is good, is get the valve, get some carborundum paste, just put that all the way around the seat to the valve, the face of the valve. And then I'll just put a little bit of spray on the seat just to help the carborundum break into the seat. So it helps it break down. Doesn't make it sticky. I've got some. And then because the valve's been refaced and the seat's been cut, really these shouldn't take a lot to grind in. And then what I'm looking for is where it was a nice ground seat, what we should have is a nice grey line all the way around the valve. Like that. So, I mean, this seat has actually been cut pretty perfect. There's no machined edge at the tip of the valve. So that's the thickness of the seat on the cutter, and then the shiny part is because the width of the valve is wider than the cut on the cutter. Basically, when we've ground it into the seat, this part here isn't doing anything. So if this was a race cylinder head, what I'd now do is then go and just back cut this to the tip of there, just to help the flow around the valve. And what that does is also it gives it more area behind there. Next thing to do is to check the seat to make sure that nice grey line is all the way around on the seat as well. If it isn't, if we can see any of the polished part of the seat around here anywhere, what that means is we haven't cut the seat properly and we just have to go in and do it again. But that is a continuous nice grey line all the way around. So basically I know that that valve is perfectly ground in and that's a perfect seal. I will check it on the vac tester downstairs once we've got it all together, so I'll show that. But what I'm going to do now is cut the other 3 inlet valves and the 4 exhaust valve seats, and then we'll get this head in the wash and we'll put it back together. So that's the CVH, been through the cleaner for a fair few hours. So what I'm going to do now is blow it all off and let's get it built. Let the customer know it's ready for him. So I've got the cylinder head all built up, all the valves are in. I've got to do a vac test on the valves, which I'll do in a minute. Next thing I'm going to do is fit the new camshaft, but I'm just going to give that a good blow out first to make sure there's no swarf in there or anything like that. And then before I fit it, I'm going to cover it in build lube as well. So we're going to get the build lube on the main journals of the camshaft and on the lobes. And give it a turn as well. It doesn't matter if the build lube drips into the cylinder head, because it's going to want all build lube on that part anyway for initial startup. Before I fit the cam, I'm going to try and get some of the build lube inside the cylinder head, and I'm also going to fit the camshaft oil seal because it's got a nice edge on the cam. So with a little bit of lube around the oil seal face, that will just push through, where if I'm trying to get the seal in once the cam's in, it's a little bit more tricky. So on these you can normally just push these home with, you can normally just push these home with your fingers. And there is a little recess for the seal to sit on as well. And really carefully fit the cam into the cylinder head. And then once it comes so far through, you can get your finger in to keep it level. And the next thing is the thrust plate for the cam. So I'm going to make sure there's build lube on that as well. And then there's two 8mm bolts that retain that. Just get a spanner for that. And then the last thing to do is just to make sure that the cam does turn, which it does, turns nice actually. Now we've got a set of new hydraulic followers for this as well, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to let my customer fit them, because if it tips upside down while it's in his car, they'll fall out, so there's no point me fitting them. And then we originally took off these little spacers, so I'll give them back to him as well. And I will give him all his old bits. So there's the front pulley, what I took off, and some bits and bobs. I'm going to let him stick them on, and I'm going to give him back his old camshaft. So he's got the Woodruff key in it. So the last thing to do is to do a vac test. So I'm at my Pro Valve to do a vac test now on the CVH XR2 cylinder head. And what we want is the vacuum on all of the ports, all 8 ports, to be in the green. I mean, the further round, the maximum I think it can reach is 0.74. So as long as we get all the way round to 0.74 or in the green, then we've got a good seal. So the first thing we need to know is that the, the vacuum pad will fit on all of the ports, which this will, I believe. Yeah, quite easily. And then we switch the pump on so it creates a vacuum. And then if I put my finger over this, you'll see it go around 0.78. That's actually got to. So let's put it on the first exhaust, and that's at 0.78. And then the second, same again, 0.78, 0.79. 0.79. The last exhaust port. So we now know that the exhaust has got a good seal. I'm going to spin it round and do the same again on the inlet. And that's it. That's the final test on the CVH, so now I can just show you what I've done. As at the beginning of the video you could see, it was just covered in dirty oil, so it was stripped, went through the acid bath. It was quite bad around here, so I've cleaned all the gasket faces up. We took the old cam out which was worn, removed the valves, taken the old stem seals off, and then there was corrosion here and all the way around here, so we've worked all that out, welded it up and then skimmed it flat. I've then reconditioned the valves, so the first step is to put them in the bead blaster. Don't touch the stem, but just clean at the back of the valve and the face of the valve. Then in the lathe to polish the stem, then measure the valve stem to valve guide clearance to make sure that's okay, and then it's had 3-angle seats, and then the top angle is just blended into the radius of the port, and then back into the cleaner, and then once it's had about 3 hours in the cleaner, it's come back out, new stem seals, all the valve springs have been cleaned and checked, and then we've built it back up. I've supplied him a new standard cam, so I fitted that, fitted the new camshaft oil seal, and then there's a new set of hydraulic followers to give back to him. And that's done. So thanks for watching this video, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you could subscribe if you've enjoyed the video. If you've got any questions, if you want to leave a comment in the comment section below, we can get on and answer that for you. And give us a thumbs up, please. Ta-ra.